Most individuals watching this already understand they ought to be saving more. That is not what this video covers. This is about 10 snares that strike millennial households in their 40s, even when they have been doing everything correctly. And the most damaging ones are not the apparent ones. Nobody is discussing snare number 5. And by the time I arrive there, you are going to want to re-examine every single financial assumption you have ever held about your retirement. Here is the dimension most finance content overlooks. This generation has weathered 2 complete economic catastrophes before reaching 40. The eldest millennials entered the workforce around 2003, only to encounter the Great Recession just a few years afterward. At one stage, more than 15% of millennials were jobless during that downturn, and many who retained their positions had wages that were stagnant for years. Then, COVID struck right as the youngest millennials were hitting their prime earning momentum. That is not an excuse, it is context, because by the time you arrive at your 40s, you have been running a financial sprint on a series of fractured legs, and now the race becomes harder, not easier, while the crowd keeps cheering and informing you your peak earning years are here. By the way, I constructed a free early retirement calculator because most online versions are mathematically flawed. It employs BlackRock and Vanguard logic to reveal the vulnerable points in your plan. And I only request your email to deliver the report so I do not retain any of your financial data. Link in the description. So here is the central image I want you to retain in your mind for this entire video. A treadmill. Not a gentle gym treadmill, an industrial one on a 10% gradient that keeps accelerating without notice. Your income is climbing, good. You purchased the house, good. Your career is advancing, great. But the treadmill got swifter. The cost of one parent's care increased. Your children's tuition increased. Your insurance premiums increased. Your property taxes increased. Every snare in this list is another anonymous hand pressing the speed button. And the cruelest aspect of the treadmill metaphor is that from the outside, you appear fine. You are still moving. You are just not progressing anywhere. In a few minutes, I'm going to demonstrate what the sandwich generation actually costs a 40-year-old in real dollars. And the figure is going to be greater than most people spend on their children's college tuition. But first, let me begin somewhere. Most financial content never begins. Not with a savings shortfall, but with a mechanism quietly consuming your savings from inside your plan. Right now, here is snare number 1, and it is not about what you contribute. It is about what gets extracted from you automatically, invisibly, every single year you remain invested. The U.S. Department of Labor stated it plainly. A 1% difference in fees will diminish your retirement account balance by 28% at retirement, not 1% less, 28% less. Consider what that signifies in your actual dollars. According to a Q4 2025 report from Fidelity, the average millennial 401k balance is $83,700. If you are 40 years old with $83,700 in a plan charging 1.5% in combined fund expense ratios, which is completely typical and often invisible, versus a plan with 0.5%, which is attainable with index funds, you will retire with roughly $180,000 less. That is not a rounding error. That is a car, a boat, and 4 years of tuition. Here is where it becomes truly fascinating. Most millennials inside employer-sponsored plans have no clue what their expense ratios are. None. They selected a fund by its name, its 5-star Morningstar rating, or because their HR representative pointed at it during onboarding. I did the identical thing in my first business. It took my accountant about 45 seconds to inform me I was in a plan charging 1.1% when identical index exposure was available at 0.3% inside the same plan. Over 30 years, a 1% fee drag on $200,000 costs you $170,000 in lost compounding. The treadmill got swifter, and you are paying for the electricity. What is the remedy? 12 minutes. Log into your plan. Find the Fund Details tab. Look for the expense ratio column. If any figure is above 0.5%, check whether a comparable index fund exists inside the same plan. In most corporate plans, it does. You switch, you set it, you never consider it again. That 12-minute decision is worth more per hour than any side hustle you could undertake. Now, the benchmark problem. And this is where people's minds tend to fracture. So stay with me. Fidelity suggests having about 3 times your annual salary saved by 40. With median millennial household income around $71,000, a 40-year-old millennial should have roughly $213,000 saved. Vanguard's median for the 35 to 44 age group was just $39,958, meaning half the generation possesses less than $40,000 saved at the precise moment the benchmark demands $213,000. That is not a modest shortfall. That is a structural problem. But here is the snare inside the snare. You think the problem is the $173,000 gap. It is not. The actual problem at retirement is closer to $700,000 because of compounding. $39,000 growing at 7% annually for 25 years becomes roughly $212,000. $213,000 at the same rate becomes roughly $156,000. You do not lose $170,000. You lose nearly $1 million of retirement wealth because of a gap that existed at 40. The treadmill does not just accelerate, it multiplies. And here's the reality nobody clarifies about being behind at 40 versus being behind at 30. At 30, one extra decade of compounding can close almost any gap. At 40, you are in the final 25-year sprint. Every year of delay now compounds against you. It is asymmetric and it is unforgiving. Goldman Sachs' 2025 retirement survey found that 59% of millennials experienced at least one major life disruption in the prior 2 years: a home purchase, a divorce, a marriage, or college costs that disrupted their retirement savings. As a result, 70% of respondents reporting a life event either paused retirement saving contributions, took a retirement plan loan, or planned to retire later. That is the snare. Not one catastrophic decision, a perfectly rational human sequence of decisions that adds up arithmetically to a catastrophe. Now, here is the behavioral reversal. You think the problem is that you are not saving enough. The actual problem is that your expenses are structurally engineered to grow faster than your income. And no amount of individual discipline can outpace a design flaw in the system you are living inside. Which brings us to snare number 2, the lifestyle velocity squeeze. And it is more sophisticated than most people credit it for. There is a well-documented pattern in behavioral economics called lifestyle inflation. Your income rises 15%, your spending rises 12%, you net 3% and feel responsible. In isolation, you are. The problem is that in your 40s, you encounter multiple simultaneous inflection points in cost, and they do not feel like inflection points. They feel like ordinary life. The cost of homeownership climbed to 51% of median household income in 2025 from 33% in 2000, an 18 percentage point jump. Over the same period, the cost of private college rose 20 percentage points to 85% from 65% of median household income. These are not lifestyle choices. They are structural increases in the price of a standard middle-class life. The CPI has risen 26% in the past 6 years. The treadmill got swifter while you were standing still. And here's the detail nobody discusses. Your 40s are when you make your most expensive non-financial decisions. You renovate the kitchen, $15,000 to $60,000 in cash or equity. You upgrade the car because the 15-year-old Camry finally became embarrassing. You start funding the college savings account because your child is 12 and the clock is suddenly audible. Every single one of these is completely rational in isolation. Together, they are a structural bypass of your wealth-building system. There is a pattern here that I have seen described again and again. Think of a physician named Andrew, completely fictional composite of a very recognizable archetype. He earns $260,000 a year at 43. He had about $90,000 in his 401k at 35 because residency paid nothing and his first attending salary went entirely to student loans. He was behind, so he maxed the 401k. He invested outside the plan. He felt like he was accelerating. And then his mother was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. His daughter got into a school that cost $72,000 a year. His wife decided they needed more space for a third child. Each of those decisions was made independently as a responsible adult in its own financial context. By 46, Andrew was contributing less to retirement than at 43 because cash flow had been consumed by ordinary life. The treadmill consumed him, and Andrew earns $260,000. Most people watching this do not. By the way, hit subscribe if you appreciate the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm may never display my videos again. And we are about to enter the snare that strikes 54% of people in their 40s. And the dollar amounts involved are genuinely startling. Snare number 3, the sandwich press. More than half of Americans in their 40s, 54%, have a living parent aged 65 or older, and are either raising a child younger than 18 or have an adult child they are helping financially. More than half. And the financial pressure is intensifying. The share of Americans who identify as part of the sandwich generation who say they are financially drained by parental caregiving has increased over the past 3 years, with 69% reporting financial pressure, up from 64% in 2022. Now, let me provide you the figures nobody puts in the same sentence. According to Genworth's Cost of Care survey, the median annual cost for a private room in a nursing home in the United States is over $116,000. Even in-home care can cost upwards of $75,000 per year. If your parent does not have long-term care insurance, and statistically they do not, that cost falls to family, which means it falls to you. That is not a medical expense. That is a structural financial event that has nothing to do with your income, your savings rate, or your financial plan. Here is the psychological dimension that makes this particularly brutal. Nobody budgets for it. You budget for your mortgage, your car payment, your vacation. Nobody puts mom's dementia care year 1 through 7 on a spreadsheet. It arrives as a surprise, and by the time it arrives, you are in the middle of what should be your peak compounding years. So I will just, manage it with the spare bedroom and some meal preparation. Yes, 69% of people in this exact situation say that. $78,000 later, the spare bedroom has a hospital bed in it. And here is the statistic that I find genuinely unsettling. More than half, 57% of sandwich generation caregivers said they have had to choose between their career and caring for their parents. More than double the 26% reported among adults overall. You are not just spending the money, you are also losing the income. The treadmill did not just accelerate. Someone removed 2 of the guardrails. Many caregivers spend an average of 50 hours per week on caregiving duties, essentially a second full-time job. Except this one pays nothing, offers no 401k match, and actively costs you compounding time. Now let me introduce someone I am going to return to. Call him Marcus. 44 years old, software engineering manager in the Pacific Northwest, makes solid money, $142,000 a year, has a house with decent equity. His 401k is better than average, but his mother moved in 2 years ago after hip surgery that was described as temporary. It is not temporary. We will return to Marcus. This is where it becomes truly interesting. Snare number 4, and this one requires me to alter your mental model about something that appears harmless. You think the problem with borrowing from your 401k is the interest rate. The actual problem is everything that occurs around the interest rate. Loan use from retirement accounts rose for the 3rd consecutive year in 2025. 26% of workers reduced their individual contributions that same year. Here is why that combination is a death spiral. You take a loan from your 401k, let us say $40,000 for a home renovation or a medical event. You tell yourself you will pay it back, and the interest you pay goes back to yourself. So, it is basically free. That is the version the plan administrator implies. Here is the version they omit. While your $40,000 is outside the market as a loan, it is not compounding. That $40,000 at 7% over 10 years would have become $78,700. You do not receive that. The interest you pay back to yourself is earned with after-tax dollars, and then, when you withdraw the money in retirement, it gets taxed again as ordinary income. You have effectively paid double tax on the repaid interest. And if you leave your employer before the loan is fully repaid, which happens to a significant share of plan participants within 5 years, the entire outstanding balance becomes a taxable distribution. If you are under 59.5, you owe ordinary income tax plus a 10% early withdrawal penalty on the full outstanding balance, meaning the $40,000 loan could trigger a $12,000 to $15,000 tax bill in the year you least anticipate it. Most people who take 401k loans are not irresponsible. They are the people financially disciplined enough to have a balance large enough to borrow against. They are not broke. They are caught in the gap between income and the structural cost acceleration of midlife. And the 401k loan becomes the escape valve. Convenient, quick, no credit check, no hard inquiry. The snare looks like a solution. Now I need you to stop thinking about individual snares and start thinking about a system, because snare number 5 is not a personal finance snare. It is a policy snare, and it lands on you whether you have made every correct individual decision or not. But here is what nobody is revealing to you about it. Stay with me, because this next segment changes the math on everything else I have said. Social Security's actuaries estimate the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund will be depleted by Q1 2033, about 7 years from now. When the trust fund is depleted, automatic benefit cuts of 17 to 23% kick in unless Congress acts. Not could kick in. The statute requires it. Social Security will exist. The program collects payroll taxes indefinitely, but the check is almost certainly smaller than what the current projection shows. Now, here is why this matters specifically for millennials in their 40s. If you were born in 1985, you become eligible for full Social Security at approximately age 67 in 2052, 19 years after the projected trust fund depletion. You are constructing a retirement plan around a benefit that the actuaries themselves project will be reduced, and the default calculator on most banking websites uses the full projected benefit. Vanguard's 2025 data projects that only 42% of millennials will maintain their current standard of living in retirement. 42%. Meaning, if you are watching this with two friends who have similar incomes and savings, one of you, statistically, does not maintain your lifestyle, and nobody informed you at the start of the race. The practical implication: your personal savings need to replace not 40% of pre-retirement income, the historical Social Security assumption, but 60 to 70%. Americans think the magic number for a comfortable retirement is $1.46 million, according to Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress study. With a reduced Social Security benefit, that number almost certainly needs to increase higher. But the number most millennial retirement plans are using is calibrated for full benefits. The treadmill got swifter, and the finish line just shifted. Here is the sardonic part. The prescription for this is not thrilling. It is not a trending stock. It is contributing more earlier to tax-advantaged accounts. Boring, repeatable, passive. The people in the strongest position right now are not the ones who discovered the right crypto trade or the right sector wager. They are the ones who established an automatic contribution in 2015 and never touched it. Let me return to Marcus for a second. Marcus knows about the Social Security situation vaguely. He has thought about it the way you think about your car needing a new timing belt eventually. You know it is coming. You are just not addressing it today. Meanwhile, his mom is in the guest room. His 401k has an outstanding loan from when the furnace and the roof both failed in the same month. His daughter is a junior in high school, and there is a very real conversation happening about university. Marcus has not opened his retirement account projections in 11 months. The math is stacking in a direction he has not examined directly. We will resolve his situation at the conclusion. Now let us discuss snare number 6, and this one is specifically a 40s snare. It does not manifest in your 30s with nearly the same intensity. The college versus retirement prisoner's dilemma. According to a 2025 Advisor Authority study, 58% of millennials reported feeling like they had to choose between home ownership and retirement. The same psychological tension applied to your child's college is even more visceral because it involves a person you love, not a structure. No parent is going to tell their 18-year-old to take out loans so you can max your Roth IRA. No one does that. And no financial article ever honestly recognizes that the rational calculation and the human calculation are completely different things. Here is what the math says dispassionately. You can borrow money for college. There is no such thing as a retirement loan. A parent who diverts $300 a month from their 401k into a 529 plan at age 42 does not lose $300 a month. At 7% over 23 years, they lose roughly $2,200 per month in potential retirement income using a 4% withdrawal rate. That is the arithmetic version of the trade-off. The human version is that you want your child to graduate without $150,000 in debt, which is one of the most comprehensible parental instincts on earth. I am not telling you not to fund the 529. I am telling you that when you are choosing, the trade-off is not $300 a month. It is a structural blow to your retirement that compounds silently for 2 decades. Private college tuition went from 65% to 85% of median household income over the past 25 years. If you had your child at 35 and they start college at 18, you are 53 years old when the first tuition check clears, right in the middle of the final sprint, where every 401k dollar should be accelerating, not decelerating, because your window to retirement is now inside 12 years. Snare number 7, the home equity illusion. There is a narrative that cycles through millennial financial discussions like folklore. Real estate always appreciates, so the equity in my house is essentially my retirement plan. I understand the reasoning. Housing prices have been extraordinary in the past 15 years, but there are 3 structural problems with this thinking that become acutely visible specifically in your 40s. 1. Your house is not liquid. It is not accessible without selling where you also have to reside or borrowing against it, which converts equity back into debt. 2. The cost of maintaining a home accelerates dramatically in your 40s. The roof that was 10 years old when you purchased it is now 25 years old. The HVAC is failing. The water heater is expiring. The original windows are leaking heat. Homeowners in midlife spend on average 1 to 2% of their home's value annually on maintenance. On a $400,000 home, that is $4,000 to $8,000 per year. Money that never appears on any savings projection, but consistently vanishes from investable cash. 3. With elevated interest rates, rising insurance premiums, and cash flush investors acquiring single-family homes, millennials who are renting are often paying more in rent than they would on a mortgage if they could get in. And those who got in are now seeing equity gains that push against the capital gains exclusion thresholds in appreciating markets. The danger is treating home equity as a savings substitute. It is an illiquid leveraged bet on a single asset that you also need to reside in. Every time you mentally included home equity in your retirement calculation instead of your 401k balance, the treadmill got a little swifter. Snare number 8, the disability insurance blind spot. And this might be the most consequential snare on this entire list, specifically because virtually nobody discusses it. The standard financial conversation is about life insurance. You need enough to replace your income if you pass away, fine. But here is the figure that reframes everything. According to actuarial data from LIMRA and the Social Security Administration, the probability of experiencing a disability lasting longer than 90 days before age 65 is roughly 1 in 4, 25%. The probability of dying before 65 is considerably lower, which means the product everyone purchases, life insurance, covers the less probable scenario, and the product almost nobody purchases, long-term disability insurance, covers the far more probable one. If you are a 40-year-old earning $90,000 a year and you become disabled for 5 years, the income loss alone is $450,000. Plus, you have stopped contributing to retirement for 5 years, which at 7% compounding costs another $150,000 to $200,000 in projected retirement wealth. That is $600,000 of financial damage from a single health event. Most employer short-term disability covers 60 to 70% of income for 90 to 180 days. After that, on most plans, you are on your own. Historical data from Vanguard illustrates that the non-housing debt burden for millennials at ages 35 to 38 was approximately double that carried by baby boomers at the same life stage. If you are carrying that debt load and lose 60% of income for a year, you do not pause. You go backward in ways that take 5 years to recover from, if ever. An individual long-term disability policy covering 60% of gross income to age 65 costs roughly 2 to 4% of gross salary and annual premiums, depending on your occupation and health history. For someone earning $90,000, that is $1,800 to $3,600 per year. For business owners, premiums can be structured as a deductible business expense. For employees, premiums are not deductible, but benefits when you receive them are tax-free. An important distinction when comparing policy options. Nobody purchases it because it is boring. It does not feel urgent. And the scenario you are insuring against, being unable to work for years, does not fit how you think about your own future until it does. Snare number 9. the peak earnings phantom. Here is a belief that is simultaneously true and hazardous. Millennials in their 40s are entering peak earnings years. Millennials born 1981 to 1996 are now in their peak earning years, and median earnings for 45 to 54-year-olds are the highest of any age bracket in Bureau of Labor Statistics data. Also true, and here is the hazardous part. Peak earnings alone will not rescue a 15-year savings deficit in a 10-year sprint. The math does not function. Let me demonstrate. You have $83,700 saved at 40, the actual Fidelity average. You need $1.46 million by 65. That is 25 years. At 7% annual return, your existing balance grows to roughly $454,000 without additional contributions. You need to close a gap of just over $1 million through contributions alone. To accomplish that at 7% over 25 years, you need to contribute approximately $14,900 per year consistently without interruption for a quarter century. That is achievable at higher incomes, but it requires zero interruptions. No 401k loan, no contribution pause, no year where a major life event redirects cash flow. 70% of respondents who experienced even one major life event either paused contributions, took a retirement plan loan, or planned to retire later. You will almost certainly experience at least one major life event in the next 25 years. So the model fractures. Peak earnings will save me is not a financial plan. It is an optimistic assumption wearing a suit.